Hello,
Hello.
and welcome to another Random Scottish History Scottish Railway Incidents readings. We're into June 1900. The same trigger warnings apply from previous episodes. Lots of really gruesome, quite disturbing details, sometimes related in these articles. No one escaped, so children, adults, the elderly, pets, farm animals, if they were anywhere near a line and they existed in Scotland at the time, they were likely to be impacted some way. So if it's not for you, then that's okay. But that's what we're going to be discussing here. There's possibly going to be repetition, later articles having further information. Maybe someone succumbed to injuries. It could just be a name, like a different spelling of a name. For genealogical purposes, but there's likely to be repetition. Also, mispronunciations of names of both people and places, because there are a lot of both, and it's likely to happen. So, do you want to start us off, Alex?
Okay. Hello. So first we've got Montrose, Arbroath and Brechin Review, then Forfar and Kincardineshire Advertiser, Friday 1st of June. Quite a mouthful. Accident. On Tuesday, forenoon, while Robert Davidson, Platelair Cove, was engaged unloading rails from a wagon at Drumlithy, one of the rails accidentally fell on his right leg, severely crushing it below the knee. He was taken to Aberdeen by train and afterwards conveyed to the Royal Infirmary where his injuries were attended to. I assume probably had his leg amputated. It's usually the way these things.
Yeah, that was the result of crushings usually. The next we have from the Greenock Telegraph and Clyde Shipping Gazette for the same date, Friday the 1st of June. We have a lamentable accident at the railway station, passenger killed. An accident unhappily attended with a fatal result occurred yesterday evening at the railway station when the 4:30 p.m. train from Glasgow Central was approaching the station. A passenger was observed to open the door of the carriage in which he had been seated and to get onto the footboard. In the act of alighting, while the train was in motion, his foot got caught and he was dragged along the platform for a considerable distance. And before help could reach him, he had fallen onto the line. When picked up, the young man, William John McLinden, 25 years old, spirit salesman, residing at 41 Abercrombie Street, Glasgow, was found to have been fearfully mutilated in the lower part of the body. He was carried to the room of Mr. McGregor, station master, and Dr. Miller arrived early, but it was apparent that nothing could be done for the unfortunate passenger, who died soon after the occurrence. Inspector Craig of the local police was present, and in the course of the evening the remains were coffined and removed to the house of the friend in Ropework Lane whom McLinden and his wife were about to visit. The accident caused much excitement at the station. I'm kind of surprised he was brought to his friend's house rather than to his own residence where his wife was. That's also possibly not the kind of visit his friend was expecting.
So next we've got Wishaw Press, Saturday 2nd of June, accident at the Steelworks. On Tuesday evening, Robert Reid, engine driver, 4 Academy Street, Berryhill, met with a serious accident within the works of the Glasgow Iron and Steel Company Limited. He had been acting temporarily as a brakesman, and at the time of the accident an engine was drawing a train of wagons out of number 5 iron ore siding. Reid was standing on the oar, and in making to jump onto one of the wagons his foot slipped and he fell in front of the last wagon, which passed over him. His left arm was badly crushed and his forehead and both feet were also badly injured. Dr. Munro attended him and ordered his removal to the Royal Infirmary, where it was found necessary to amputate his left arm.
Yeah, lots of amputations going on at this time. We have the Aberdeen Press and Journal for Monday the 4th of June. A goods train on fire at Edzell. That was fairly common. Considerable consternation was occasioned among the officials at Edzell railway station on the arrival of the 11:20 a.m. goods train on Saturday, when it was observed that one of the trucks was on fire. As soon as the train was brought to a standstill, steps were taken to have the flames, which were then burning fiercely, extinguished, and the truck was shunted back to the watering station, where the large hose used for filling the engine boiler was turned upon it, and the fire was soon got out. When the train left Inchblain about 3 miles from Edsall, everything was in order, and it is conjectured that a spark from the engine had fallen upon the wagon and ignited it. The contents, which were of a miscellaneous character, were of considerable value, and have been practically all destroyed either by fire or water. That was really common. Stations were burned up just from sparks from passing trains and things. So
there's coal dust all over the place. Everything's made of wood, you know. It's well, not everything, but lots of stuff made of wood. Okay, so next up we got Dundee Evening Post, Monday 4th of June, and it's not to the proper signal. A sheriff's inquiry was held at Greenock this afternoon respecting the railway accident at Inchgreen on the 13th of May, when 4 men were killed by a runaway engine going over an embankment. John Laurie, signalman, admitted sending the engine down the branch line towards the dock. He did not know its destination, but assumed that it was going to dock. The driver did not give the proper signal when passing the cabin, and he should have seen that the danger signal on the main line was against him. The jury found that the men met their death by an engine going over the embankment. I'm just wondering who they would hold responsible for that one. Possibly a follow-up on that, who knows.
Well, I mean, going over the embankment wasn't the cause of death, though, was it? The cause of death was the impact and being burned alive in the case of the engine driver for that one. This was the Greenock incident we talked about last time. Next we have the Banffshire Journal and General Advertiser for Tuesday the 5th of June. Elgin, fatality on the railway. On Thursday on the Highland Railway near Elgin, John Sutherland, about 60, quarry worker residing in Elgin who was walking on the line, was struck by a train approaching the station from the Keith direction and instantaneously killed. Sutherland was somewhat deaf and had not apparently heard the approaching train. He leaves a widow and grown-up family. Having impairment in your sight or hearing when anywhere near railway lines at this point seems to have been near enough a death sentence, because the amount of people that got killed just through a lack of noticing what was going on around them.
Yeah, long shifts, half deaf, half blind, you know. It's like, yeah, it's not looking promising for you. So next up, Dundee Evening Telegraph, Wednesday 6th of June. Man killed on railway near Inch. James Watt, surfaceman, aged about 50 years, residing at Ward House, was on Tuesday run over by the 11:45 forenoon goods train from Keith, about 1 3/4 miles north of Inch. Returning from taking a drink at a neighbouring pump, he failed to observe the approaching train or the warning signs of his companions at a distance. He was decapitated and the body otherwise mangled. Dr. Mitchell, Old Rain, was immediately summoned, but of course could do nothing. The circumstances are rendered doubly sad by his wife having been bedridden for years. The youngest of their two of the family is 13. Deceased has resided in the district for a considerable time. Yeah, so I mean, like we're saying, deafness, blindness, stuff like that, but also inebriation.
It seems a moot point in mentioning that the doctor could do nothing after stating the guy was decapitated. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it just shows up. He's dead.
Yeah, didn't need a doctor for that. So next we have from the Kirkintilloch Herald, Wednesday the 6th of June. Accident to an excursionist. Saturday being the annual trade holiday in Motherwell, some 12,000 to 14,000 left the town in the forenoon. Messrs Colville's Dalzell Iron and Steel Works sent 4 trains to Inverness. On the return journey, David Walkinshaw, miner, Thorn Street, looked out of a window when the train was running between Cumbernauld and Greenhill Junction. It is stated his head came in contact with a bridge. He lay in an unconscious state till the arrival at Motherwell station, when he was examined by Dr. Kay. He sustained a compound fracture of the skull and was sent to the Royal Infirmary. There is little hope of his recovery. I would think not.
No.
That happens more than you'd think too. Like I've just done a round up there where another man did exactly the same thing. He's en route to emigrating to Canada. He's on the train to get the boat over, and he puts his head out the window and is immediately knocked straight back into the carriage because his head came in contact with a bridge. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't think you could do that now. In Scotland,
no, that's why you've got
really...
these little windows at the top, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
so you just can't open them. That was probably wanting for a while, that change.
So next up, Greenock Telegraph and Clyde Shipping Gazette, Thursday 7th. Fatal railway accident. Brakesman named Henry Quinn, 25 years of age, unmarried and residing in North Orchard Street, Motherwell, was killed while engaged at shunting operations at Galsborough on the Caledonian Railway. He was crushed between the buffers of two wagons. He was a native of County Down and had no relatives in Motherwell.
Shunting. Just always with the shunting. Greenock Telegraph and Clyde Shipping Gazette for Friday the 8th of June gives us attempted suicide at Greenock. Yesterday afternoon, a labourer named Joseph Hill, who resides in Mill Street, attempted to commit suicide on the Glasgow and South Western Railway near the Cartsburn signal box, but he was fortunately prevented from doing so. Hill, it appears, had been sitting on a wall near the Cartsburn siding for some time, but was closely watched by two companions who had some doubts as to his intentions. On the approach of a train proceeding towards Prince's Pier Station, he suddenly jumped down off the wall and laid himself across the rails, evidently with the object of letting the engine and carriages pass over him. His companions, however, quickly removed him from the line and had him out of danger before the train came up. Hill was afterwards taken into custody because it was committing suicide. It was a crime previously. You didn't get away with trying to do away with yourself. And so many people chose the railways as a way, which I can see it as being a quick exit, but what you're leaving behind for the people to find and the railway officials and...
It's also the chance of derailing a train. If you derail a train and you accidentally kill a bunch of people, that's
that too?
That's right. Some kind of crime in itself.
You're just putting yourself in danger.
So next up, we got the Scotsman, Monday the 11th of June. A couple of wee ones here. So fatal accident at Campsie on Saturday afternoon. An old man named James Forsyth, a plate layer on the North British Railway, was struck by a passing engine and killed almost instantaneously. That's that one. So on to fatal railway accident at Alloa. On Saturday evening, a fatal accident occurred on the railway line to the west of Alloa, leading to the Alloa Bridge across the Forth. When the 5:30 train from Alloa was approaching the signal cabin on the north side of the river, the signalman noticed the door of one of the carriages open and stopped the train. The compartment was empty, but on an examination of the line, the body of an elderly man was found lying in the 6-foot way at a point near Longcarse Farm on the outskirts of Alloa. From traces on the line, it seemed deceased had got out of the carriage to recover his hat, which had fallen out further along the line. Deceased had in his possession a ticket from Tillicoultry to Glasgow. Later in the evening, the deceased was identified as James Dickey, Whitevale, Glasgow, a widower between 60 and 70, who had been to Tillicoultry visiting friends. Yeah, if you drop your hat out of a train, just leave it. It's fine. You know, it's gone. Just move on.
Hat's cheaper than your life, you know. From the Devon Valley Tribune, Tuesday the 12th of June, man falls from train. An accident was reported to the Clackmannan police at Alloa on Saturday as the 5:38 p.m. train from Alloa to Glasgow was passing Longcarse Junction. One of the passengers, an old man, was seen to fall from one of the carriages and was dragged along the line for a distance of about 25 yards. The train was stopped, but when the man was picked up, life was extinct. Deceased had in his possession a paper bearing the address Hugh Steele, Hurlford, Galston Road, Chapel Cottage. It was written in this inverse order. He had the half return of a ticket entitling him to travel from Tillicoultry to Glasgow, Queen Street. We have since learned that the unfortunate man's name is Dickey, and his family, 4 daughters and 1 son, reside in Whiteinch, Glasgow. The address found in his possession was that of a friend. So that's just a follow-up article giving a wee bit more information to that of Alex's.
So next up, Edinburgh Evening News, Wednesday the 13th. Man killed on the railway at Motherwell. A man of about 30, apparently an iron worker or crane man, was last night found dead on the Caledonian Railway between Clydesdale and Motherwell. He had apparently been knocked down by a train while walking along the line.
Yeah, that's what you get if you walk along the line.
Maybe just not on the line, next to the line. It just seems... Well, anyway.
I think in some places there probably wasn't very much space between the siding and the line, like, because it would have been quite a narrow cutting. They wouldn't want to have to excavate huge swathes just to put a line of a set size through, and these cuttings were just used as shortcuts. By
just pay more attention.
mere
If you have to
everyday
walk on the line,
use.
pay more attention, you know.
Yeah, you would think these people would be, like, regardless, from the Aberdeen Press and Journal, Wednesday the 13th of June, we have a serious accident. An accident of a serious nature occurred to a little boy, son of Mr. Bain, farmer, Hill of Ashogel, yesterday afternoon, whereby his left leg was broken and his head severely cut. The accident took place at a level crossing on the railway on the farm when the 3:15 p.m. train from Macduff was passing. 2 carts were crossing the line as the train came up, and, but for the driver being able to slow up the train, the probability is that the accident would have been far more serious. The boy in question was walking behind the last cart, and his father, who was in charge, observing that an accident was imminent, jumped off his cart, caught his son and threw him onto the embankment clear of the train. The boy rolled down, however, in front of the wheel of the cart which passed over him. The engine grazed the rear of the last cart without, however, doing much injury. The train was brought to a standstill and the injured boy and his father were taken to Turriff, where the boy's injuries were attended to by Dr. Wallace and he was afterwards conveyed home. So that was good presence of mind for his dad there throwing him up, but it's a wee shame that he didn't grab onto a thing, he rolled down again, you know, but...
very dramatic though, very action movie, you know.
A lot of that going on.
So, Kirkintilloch Herald, Wednesday the 13th, fatal accident. On Saturday afternoon, an old man named Jacob Forsyth, surfaceman residing at Craighead, Milton, was killed on the railway at the level crossing at Mackiecroft. He had gone on duty at 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon and had proceeded as far as this level crossing already mentioned, when it is thought that he had been overtaken with illness and had sat down upon the rails to rest. The 1:35 train from Blainfield was about due, and as the driver rounded the curve at the alum works, he observed the old man on the line. He whistled and otherwise tried to attract his attention, as well as shutting off the steam, but Forsyth either did not hear or was unable to rise, and the train, not being pulled up in time, struck him and threw him onto the other side of the rails, or other line of rails. It was not going at any great speed then, as it was drawn up some 30 yards further on. Forsyth was lifted into the guard's van in an unconscious condition. He had been struck on the side of the head, but his injuries were not the kind that railway accidents usually are. He was taken to his home, and Dr. Naismith was called in, but within an hour the old man succumbed. The doctor expressed the opinion that had he been a young man, the injuries would probably not have proved fatal, and that death was as much due to shock of the nervous system as to anything else. Forsyth had been for a long period of years in the railway service and was approaching 70 years of age. He leaves a wife with whom deep sympathy is expressed, but he had no family.
It seems really strange though, doesn't it? Because it's saying that the injuries were not of the kind that railway accidents usually are. I would think you would get the full gamut of injuries from railway accidents, because people are hit in all manner of ways and angles at different speeds, and some are thrown, some aren't. I can't understand what he means by that.
Maybe because it's low speed, something like that.
Maybe.
But
it's got to be horrible, like realising what's about to happen to like someone that's in front of you and not being able to do anything about it.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like.
It's also saying that he'd been overtaken with illness and had to rest on the rails, and it feels like if something hits you so bad, and he's a railway guy, he probably knows a lot about the schedule. He might even have known a train was coming. To actually just take a rest on the rails directly. I feel like there's a good chance that was actually responsible for his death. They're saying like a younger man would have survived these injuries and it was shock that got him, but he was unconscious.
I'd have to assume he didn't have another option, that there wasn't another option of anywhere else to sit down. Like, maybe he just got so dizzy, so like, oh my god, and he's had to just sit where he was, because, yeah, you would choose somewhere else to sit if there was a different option, I would think. Okay, from the Scotsman, Thursday 14th of June, we have railway accident. Neil McConnell, 19 years old, surfaceman, Burnbank, while working on the up loop line at Straven Junction on the Caledonian Railway, was on Tuesday run down by a mineral train. The engine, 6 wagons and van passed over him, severing his left leg below the knee, mangling his right hand and injuring his thigh. He was sent on to Glasgow Royal Infirmary.
Oh. Sure, I've got high hopes for that guy. But oh my word. A small novel here apparently. Aberdeen Press and Journal, Thursday 14th of June. Bring this back up. Peculiar accident at Aberdeen Station, 3 people injured. Yesterday afternoon, about 2:30, while the 220 Deeside suburban train, which had just discharged its passengers, was being shunted back into number 2 dock at Aberdeen Joint Passenger Station, the carriages, after receiving the necessary impetus from the engine, ran into the station and, having too much way, dashed violently into a buffer at the end of the dock. The first carriage crashed through the lavatory, which is erected at this point, and almost entirely demolished the structure, the carriage rearing upwards on top of the wreckage and remaining in this position, while the one which followed assumed a similar position in the rear. The other carriages, however, remained on the metals. Although there was no passengers on board the train, there were, unfortunately, several persons in the lavatory at the time of the accident. These included a number of young men who were bound for the Northern Cooperative Company's picnic at Myrtle, and when the first carriage crashed into the frail structure, 2 of them were knocked violently to the ground by the falling timbers and sustained severe injuries. One of them, Ernest Bruce, 16, son of the police sergeant at Huntly, was severely bruised about the back and cut about the face and head. He was conveyed to the waiting room and was immediately attended to by Dr. Ogilvy Will. After having his wounds dressed, Bruce was removed to the Royal Infirmary in the ambulance. Another young man, Angus Martin, who resides at 58 Castle Street, climbed over the top of some wreckage and was assisted into a cab by several of his companions. He had an exceedingly narrow escape from being choked. He was fixed by the neck among the debris, and only after considerable difficulty did he manage to extricate himself and climb over the ruins of the lavatory. The third lad, who was but slightly injured, escaped in a similar manner. Station Superintendent Duguid Station Superintendent Duguid was quickly on the spot when the crash was heard and supervised the work of removing the injured men from the wreckage and rendered first aid. They then had Bruce placed on the stretcher and conveyed by a squad of the Joint Station Ambulance class to the infirmary, as already indicated. Bruce, while being removed, although he appeared to be suffering considerable pain, kept up his spirits. Mr. W. Rintoul, North British agent, and Mr. John McGregor, Caledonian Railway Company, were also assiduous in rendering assistance to the injured. Deputy Chief Constable Anderson and Inspector Goodall, with a staff of police, were early on the scene and kept back the large crowd which had by this time gathered. About 4:15, the railway officials succeeded in getting the carriages clear of the lavatory building, and the effect of this step was to render still more evident the great extent of the damage. The buffer end of the line was completely torn up, and a long stretch of railing had been wrenched away. As regards the lavatory itself, more than half had been torn completely open, and the officials were kept busily engaged in removing the debris, now fit for nothing but firewood. The entire removal of the wrecked building was effected before 8:00, and it may well be regarded as doubtful whether, after so serious an accident, such an erection will again be placed upon the same site. Mr. W. Ducher, passenger superintendent of the Great North, was exceedingly active in superintending the work of officials in clearing away the wreckage, and Mr. J. Sim, train clerk, also rendered effective assistance. The breakdown squad, under the charge of Mr. James Morrison, were summoned by telephone from Kitty Brewster and their services were promptly available. The cause of the accident. That the train rushed along with unusual velocity is clearly shown by the havoc that has been caused, and by the position in which the rearmost carriage stood after the accident. How the occupants of the lavatory escaped with their lives is almost inexplicable. One of the railway servants who energetically assisted to rescue them says it was simply a miracle, and this is precisely the view that thrusts itself upon anyone who gives even a casual glance at the wreckage. Future inquiry will no doubt disclose the cause of the accident. Disastrous as have been the consequences, it is cause for congratulation that no lives were lost. That is surprising.
Fact. Yeah. But that guy, the guy that got strung up by the neck, how did that happen?
It's just pinned under rubble, like across the throat, I guess.
The way it described it made it seem like he was like strung up by the neck, though. He was fixed by the neck among the debris. I guess maybe it could just be something.
Probably just pinned by a bar with this weighted on the other end. But I reckon some of these guys probably can't go to the bathroom anymore without fear of a railway bursting through the wall, you know?
Like, public lavatories are out the question.
Interesting euphoria there. But there's an illustration to go with that one in the book if you're interested.
For the Stonehaven Journal, Thursday the 14th of June, boy killed on the Great North Railway. On Saturday, a sad fatality happened on the Great North of Scotland Railway. A boy of 10 years joined the 11 forenoon mail at Buckie for Cullen. On the train leaving Cullen, a porter saw him unable to get out and crying. He fell out on the north side of the line just beyond Glasgow and was killed. He was picked up by a surfaceman and taken by next train to Portsoy, where he was identified in the afternoon as Joseph Smith, Latin, son of Mrs. Joseph Addison, Portessie. The body was taken home by the 6:30 train. Porter saw him unable to get out and crying. At that point, would not more attention have been paid to the kid? Would someone not have been paying attention to him to make sure that he didn't exit
I'm not exactly
the train?
sure what you could, what specifically happened.
Yeah, that's...
It's hard to picture
don't think
what
that
they're
gives you enough
describing there.
detail.
I don't think so. Okay, so Motherwell Times, Friday 15th of June, railway accidents. The Government Blue Book giving the Board of Trade returns of railway accidents during the year 1899 has been issued. It shows a considerable increase on the previous year of persons killed and injured. It is perhaps too soon yet to say what effect the Workmen's Compensation Act will have on the number of accidents, but it is a curious fact that the trades to which it applies are complaining of an increase in accidents. A compensation act must in the first place aim at reducing accidents, and in the second place compensate for injury done. Its main purpose must be to save life. Can it be possible that the Compensation Act is going to fail in this, its primary purpose? We hope not. The Blue Book shows that the last year 1,240 persons were killed and 7,105 injured on the railways of the United Kingdom, bringing an increase on the previous year of 61 killed and 762 injured, the greatest increase being amongst railway servants. In the detailed list of killed and injured, there are some curious figures given. For example, 131 persons committed suicide, and another 13 who tried to do so and failed were injured. 313 were killed and 139 injured while trespassing on the line. 60 were killed and 22 injured at level crossings. It is, however, the railway servants that swell the total, 531 being killed and 4,633 injured. When we remember that this heavy loss is an annual one, we begin to realise the necessity for something being done at once to minimise it as much as possible. If all these were lost on a battlefield in South Africa, what an outcry there would be. And here we have at home a bloodier field than the battlefield, and very little said about it.
We've said that before.
Yeah.
That if the sheer amount of just injuries negating the amount of deaths were to happen on the line, there would be a crazy outcry. Like, change would be made. There would likely be marches and protests to ensure that change was made. That it took so long for for the precautions to be put in place. Just shows how unwilling the railway companies and the Tories were to expend the money to make these changes.
No surprises.
No, not really. The Dundee Evening Post for Saturday the 16th of June. We have railway smash at Perth, engine dashes into goods train, brakesman hurt, damage to rolling stock. Shortly before 12 o'clock today, an alarming accident occurred at Perth General Station which, but for the prompt action of an engine driver, might have had serious consequences. The goods train from Perth North to Perth South was standing at the back of the Perth General Station on the up goods loop awaiting the signal from the North British Junction at the south end of the station when an engine and van were returning from Perth Goods North to the North British locomotive shed. At this point, where the rear of the goods train was standing, it was impossible for the driver to see more than 50 yards, and as the North British engine was running tender first, it was almost on the goods train before the driver noticed anything wrong. He at once applied the brake, but the engine went crash into the rear of the goods van, in which was James Davy, Caledonian goods guard, residing at 15 Whitefriars Street, Dovecote. Davy sustained a very severe scalp wound and lost a great quantity of blood. He was attended on the spot by Mr. J.D. Smith and Mr. P. Durward of the Station Ambulance Corps. The injured man was afterwards removed to the infirmary. The impact was such as to smash the end of the goods van, and a part of the van went right through the side of the engine tender. A hole was made in the tank, and the water at once rushed out. Fortunately, the carriages kept the rails, otherwise the accident might have been more serious. So that seems like a wee lucky escape, that one.
So next up we've got West Lothian Courier, Saturday 16th of June, railway fireman killed. Sheriff MacLeod and a jury held a fatal accidents inquiry at Linlithgow on Monday concerning the death of David Caldwell Miller, fireman, 28 years of age, Kepakill, Cowlairs, Glasgow. According to the evidence, the deceased was fireman on the engine of a goods train running between Sighthill and Perth on the night of the 15th of May last, and between Witchborough Junction and Dalmeny Station. Miller had gone on the top of the tender for the fire cleaners in order to have the fire of the engine cleaned on arriving at Dalmeny Station, and was killed while passing under the Humby Bridge, his head having come in contact therewith. The driver of the train is very deaf, and when being examined as one of the witnesses at the inquiry, the Procurator Fiscal had to shout into his ear, whereupon one of the jurymen asked his lordship if it was competent for the North British Railway Company to employ any person as an engine driver who was defective in hearing. The sheriff, that is a very interesting point, but this court, I'm afraid, has got nothing to do with the engine driver. The jury found that the death was caused by the deceased's head coming in violent contact with the bridge under which the train was travelling. Yeah, no kidding.
Happened quite a lot. But
fire cleaner, cleaning the fire.
Well,
Needs good clean fire.
The jury make a very good point, because engine drivers were the main authorities on a train. They had to be aware of what was going on. They had to be observant. They had to be able to react to things. And if you were hard of hearing, you might not hear fog detonators go off. You might not hear any number of ways of signalling that was used at the time. So I think the jury probably make a good point that he shouldn't have been an engine driver still. From the Dundee Evening Telegraph, Tuesday the 19th of June, accident on the Highland Railway, young man seriously injured. A young man named Alexander Murray, engine cleaner, was accidentally run down by a goods engine in the yard of Inverness railway station today. He was removed to the infirmary where his injuries were found to be of a very serious character. His head is badly damaged and his right foot is almost cut off, while his right leg is broken at the knee. He is in a very low condition. Murray is 16 years of age and has only been 3 months in the employment of the Highland Railway. And to have been disabled so completely at the age of 16 when just starting employment.
Yeah.
That sucks for him.
It's off to a bad start.
That's really terrible.
So next up we've got Dundee Courier, Saturday 23rd of June, railway fatality at Dundee, labourer's sad death. Yesterday, a sad fatality occurred on the Dundee and Arbroath joint railway near the new station at the Stanner Gate near Dundee. A mason's labourer named James Carlin, who resided at 29 Blackness Square, having been killed. It appears that Carlin had been working near the East End platform, where a signal cabin is being erected. He had occasion to proceed along the side of the down line, but unfortunately failed to hear the approach of the 7 a.m. train from Dundee to Forfar, with the result that the buffer of the engine struck him with considerable force. So violent was the blow that the unfortunate man was thrown against a bridge and sustained very severe injuries. In fact, the man's death occurred almost immediately after the accident, his head being terribly smashed. Information of the accident was sent to the railway officials at Broughty Ferry, and a medical gentleman was sent to the spot, but his services were not required. Carlin, who was about 55 years of age, was married and is survived by a widow and four of a family. He was very well liked amongst his fellow workmen, and his sudden end cast quite a gloom over them. Yeah, that'll do it. And a medical gentleman was sent to the spot. I mean, if it was a doctor, they would say doctor, so it would be like a paramedic or something like that, like the equivalent.
Well, the paramedics were what were known as the ambulance corps, and they seemed to have been initially tied to the railway. Really, if you were injured or ill and near a railway station, there wasn't really a better place to be besides the hospitals at this point, because the railway staff, they held competitions, ambulanceman competitions and first aid competitions and things. So these were people who were quite well versed in aiding a person in difficulties. So
and it seems, like as long as you get found fast enough after having an accident, it always seems that the doctors get there quite quickly. That's kind of a running theme. I mean, on the whole, there's not really a lot they can do when they get there. It's just pointing at a mess and saying, he's done. But at least they got there quickly. Sometimes they could help, so so it's good. At least that's something,
The Dundee Evening Post for Saturday the 23rd of June gives us the railway smash at Perth, sad sequel. A sad sequel to the railway smash which took place at the Perth General Station on Saturday last is to be recorded. It will be remembered that a North British goods engine and van crashed into the rear of a goods train standing at the back of the Perth General Station, as a result of which Mr. James Davey, Caledonian goods guard residing at 15 Whitefriars Street, Dovecote, Perth, was injured. Mr. Davey received a very severe scalp wound and was removed to the Royal Infirmary, but a day or two ago he was taken to his home in Dovecote. The injured man gradually sank and passed away last night. Your home was where even medical men and hospital staff preferred people to be for recuperating. If they didn't have to be in hospital, then you would be in your house, attended to maybe by a local doctor who would come and check on you occasionally. So you got people dying in their own homes quite a lot, rather than in the hospitals after these kind of accidents.
I mean, I'm assuming there's an admin somewhere in the hospital that likes the fact that they're saving money, by keeping, by getting people moved along. But it also is probably beneficial and to the patient himself.
I think it was for
hospitals
the benefits,
those days. There's a good chance that you're going to catch something in hospitals. So if you move them on and then give them to their family, who are going to be more attentive than the staff can be, it might actually just be a better solution.
Even then, hospital sanitation was far better, at the start of the 19th century. The start of the 20th century than it had ever been in the 19th century. I think they just prefer. I think they felt it was more positive for you to be recuperating amongst family and with a kind of constant care, from the family and in conjunction with whatever doctor was nearby. So
better place to be. Happier atmosphere. Well, to an extent. So next up we've got Dundee Evening Post, Monday 25th of June, accident to Highland Railway workmen. Walter Chisholm, a young labourer employed in the Highland Railway locomotive works, was severely injured this morning near the Inverness station. While engaged in the operation of placing a number of wagon springs on the tender of the engine, he fell from the tender a distance of 15 feet, his back striking the edge of the station platform, rendering him unconscious. He was removed to the Northern Infirmary in an ambulance wagon. 15 feet and then land on your back. I guess the corner, it's not a good one.
It's pretty horrible. For the Dundee Evening Telegraph, for Monday 25th of June, a girl falls from a train. On Saturday night, a little girl had the misfortune to fall from passenger train between Coatdyke and Sunnyside on the North British Railway. She was picked up in an unconscious condition and removed home in the Coatbridge ambulance wagon. The girl's name is Mary Ann Humes, residing at Carrick Street, Coatbridge. That's all it gives us. So we'll maybe see how she got on later, possibly.
Cross our fingers for her. Huh?
Mm.
So this one, Dundee Courier, Tuesday 26th of June. Accident. Yesterday, while Robert Gillespie, shoemaker, residing in St Mary Street, was crossing the railway near the Dundee and Arbroath Joint Railway goods shed, he was run down by some wagons which were being shunted, with the result that the wheels of the wagons passed over his left leg, thereby breaking it above the knee. Dr. Kell, who attended the man, ordered his removal to the infirmary.
Shunting again.
Wheels of a wagon, I mean, would that not just sever your leg? It's just the fact.
Apparently not always.
Not think about it too hard,
No. For the Dundee Evening Telegraph, Thursday the 28th of June, there's been a railway fatality at Montrose, a veteran's sad death. At an early hour this morning, John Craig, for many years employed on the North British Railway as gatekeeper at Broomfield Junction, Montrose, died at his house in North Esk Road from the effects of injuries received in shunting operations there on Tuesday. He was standing on the 6-foot way when, after being warned by Kenneth Mackenzie, guard of the goods train, that he was too near, he was struck on the right hand and side by the footboard of the engine and knocked to the ground. With the assistance of a surfaceman named John Walker, he was able to walk home, where Dr. Key attended him. His right hand, which was cut, was dressed, and although he complained of internal injuries, it was thought that up to last night he was making satisfactory progress. Shortly after midnight, however, his condition changed for the worse, and he passed away somewhat suddenly at 12:30. John, as he was familiarly called, was well known in the district, especially amongst railway servants, in whose ranks he was a veteran, his connection with the railway extending over a period of 52 years. He was 76 years of age and a native of Brechin. His wife predeceased him a considerable time ago, and he leaves a grown-up family. So that's a shame. But there it goes to the older people still working on the railway, either through there being no pension provisions or it being so sparse that it didn't make sense. You couldn't live from the pension at the time, so you would keep working until you physically couldn't continue anymore. So
and he knew something was wrong as well, clearly. But next up, we've got Dundee Evening Telegraph, Saturday 30th of June. This is the last one for June. Station master killed on Highland Railway. News was received in Inverness late last night of a sad accident at Moy Station on the Aviemore and Inverness section of the Highland Railway, by which Mr. John Beattie, station master, was instantaneously killed. Mr. Beattie was in the act of crossing the line to gain the down platform just as the mail train due at Inverness at 8:50 p.m. was entering the station. He attempted to mount the platform but failed and, losing his footing, fell back on the line in front of the engine. When picked up, he was found to be quite dead, his head being dreadfully crushed. Deceased, who had been 12 years in the Highland Railway employment, leaves a widow and 2 of a family.
which shows that even experience couldn't save you sometimes.
Yeah, it just happens.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
So that's us for June 1900 on Scotland's railways. Not very much positive going on for June. We don't really have the usual parliamentary reports of changes that were being made to save any of these people.
Well, we did, however, have the statistics for accidents and
Yeah.
like, who's being affected
Yeah.
the most by like the lack of safety procedures. So there's at least something. I mean, it's brought up in the newspapers. It's getting shared about. You know,
Shows they
brought
were
to the public
perfectly
attention.
aware
Yeah, they
of
were aware.
exactly how dangerous the railways were. Like, so. But that's us. So until next time for July, enjoy it.
Yeah.